A good understanding of emotions does so much for us. It helps us build better relationships. It helps us be more consistent and resilient. It helps us to achieve more. It lets us have a much better relationship with ourselves, and it's a big step in that elusive path towards true adulthood. Nowhere is this more true than with anger. Without a fundamental understanding of what anger is, what it's for, and how it works, many of us end up confused by it, overwhelmed by it, afraid of it, or entirely closed off from it. Today, I'm going to unpack some of the essential knowledge about anger, and I'll try to give you ideas about healthy ways to express your anger, ways that will lead to good results in your life. If you find this video helpful, then please hit the like button, leave a comment, and remember to be subscribed to my channel. Okay, so today we're talking about anger. I will just say that I've just recovered from COVID, so if I sound a little bit bunged up, then I apologise. But I feel really inspired to talk about this, so I'm just going to talk a bit about anger and try and give you some practical tools about healthy ways of expressing yourself. Anger is an interesting topic in personal development and in personal growth. We did an episode about it on the podcast. I've often talked about it before. I've mentioned it on this channel before, but I just want to talk about it specifically because one of my clients recently asked a question about this. He's a man, and every man in our culture is wrestling with the legacy of patriarchy. This is maybe discomfort, expressing emotions and being emotional. Maybe it's working with power dynamics. Whatever it is, whatever legacy each man has been left with, we're all working to grow out of it and to become better people, leaving behind all that nonsense. And one of the ways that men, but a lot of women also, struggle expressing feelings is around anger. How do you express anger in a way that's actually healthy and productive, leads to better relationships, is a good inspiring example for children, will promote helpful dynamics at work? All of these things are a positive result of having a good relationship with anger. But how do you do it? And this was a really useful question because I talk about the theory or the vague theory around anger a lot. I've mentioned boundaries before and why we have anger and what it's trying to do for us, but I just want to go into a bit more detail about that. I'm going to give you 3 practical ways in order to healthily and effectively express your anger in your life. But before we get onto that, I want to talk about a bit more the theory, so you really understand what anger's doing, why it exists, why you have this feeling, what it's trying to tell you, and what it tells you about where you are in your personal growth right now. So we all struggle with anger in some way or other. Perhaps we have an overabundance of it and we're angry a lot, and it's always simmering just behind the scenes a little bit. I've talked before about how emotions are like water, and an emotion will emerge out of the depths and give us a piece of information, and then once we've dealt with it and we've behaved appropriately for that feeling, then it will just wash on back into the background state of the feelings that we're having all the time. But for many people, anger is simply there waiting for us all the time. It can flash into action. Suddenly we're furious, where before we felt pretty calm. So for some people, there's an overabundance of anger. Other people feel no anger at all at any time. They don't have any conflict. They never feel a reason to be angry. They're baffled by the whole idea of anger. And it's often an interesting question to ask one of my clients, what's your relationship with anger? Because for some people, early in life, they were taught that anger is just inconvenient and difficult and problematic. And so your job is to repress it and avoid it, and to regard it with a lot of suspicion and probably shame. So for some people, it's quite difficult to access anger. And that in itself leads to problems around boundaries and self-esteem and having good power dynamics in relationships. So that's another interesting way in which some people have to work with anger. And then for a lot of people, of course, it's not that there is too much anger or too little anger. We feel our anger quite healthily, but how specifically do you express that? What words do you use? How can you use it to promote good relationships with your partner or with your children or at work? How can you get the good stuff out of anger? Instead of being afraid of it, not knowing what to say, not knowing how to express this stuff, being afraid that if you do express it, it'll be domineering or it'll be violent or it'll ruin relationships. How do you get the best out of this feeling? So as ever, I'm going to be drawing upon The Language of Emotions, which is a book by a woman called Carla McLaren. I regard her to be sort of the great author at the moment around the idea of emotions, and she's taught me and thousands of people around the world so much about emotions. What are they? Where do they come from? How do they function? What is each emotion trying to tell us? And how should we respond to them appropriately so that not only are we managing our emotional landscape well, but we're also using the wisdom that those emotions bring us to improve our lives, to improve our relationships, to pursue things effectively in our lives, to feel good about ourselves. All these sorts of things are the domain of emotions. Without emotions doing this stuff for us, all sorts of things in our lives would not function properly, they'd fall away. We'd need to be much more conscious about managing all sorts of things. But our emotions exist in the background. They're very wise, at the same time as being kind of simplistic, and they bring us crucial information, which, amongst other things, helps us with our personal development and becoming a better, stronger, wiser version of ourselves. That's certainly Carla's take on this, and it's certainly mine as well. So, what does she have to say about anger? Well, I've mentioned before that Carla's whole thing is that anger is there to preserve our boundaries. We have things in our lives that are okay for us and things that go beyond what's okay for us. Maybe certain language, maybe certain behavior, maybe the way people treat us or the way we treat ourselves, maybe what we choose to do with our time. There are things that are okay and things that aren't. And the line between is our boundary. So whenever that boundary is crossed, either someone says something to us that's unacceptable, or we allow ourselves to be drawn into a situation or to engage with something that doesn't feel okay, or when something that's really precious to us is not respected, not honoured. Those are the moments when our boundary has been violated, and so anger surges to the fore and says something needs to be done here. There are some times when that's really obvious. We feel angry and we can immediately say, well, this person just said that to me. I find it totally inappropriate. I feel like my boundaries have been violated and I need to take this action. I need to push back, or I need to say some words to them, or I need to make sure I'm not in this situation again. So there is a very clear example. Anger gave you a piece of information and you can immediately take action. And I think when that happens in our lives, it's not really a problem. We know what's going on here. The problem is, of course, that life is rarely that simple. Sometimes things are just a background part of our lives, just simmering along, and we don't understand why we're angry all the time. We don't understand how that is linked to our anger. Carla sent out a really interesting email recently. There's about to be, I think, a new edition of The Language of Emotions. And in this, she's changing the section about anger to be so much focused on boundaries and more on values. And the core questions around anger become, what do I value and what needs to be protected and restored? It's the same stuff. This is still ultimately about boundaries, but it's a more nuanced approach, and I think it's brilliant. So I'm just going to unpack a little bit about what she's talking about and how we actually make use of this stuff. So values are the things that we protect the most, that we value the most, the things that we base all of our decision making on, and ultimately it should form the basis of our ethical framework, and that ideally should form the basis of all the choices and the decisions and the relationships and the words that we say, and everything sort of should emanate from the core of our values. For example, I know some people who value fairness and honesty and justice as hugely important core values. That's not important for everybody, but for people who do have that as a core value, they tend to end up working in sectors where they are helping people. They're ensuring that there is more fairness and balance in their relationships. It's hugely important that things are fair and balanced, and they will react very strongly to places where they see an unfair situation or a lack of justice. So those people can trace back their response to something through their ethical framework to a core value of justice or fairness. So we all have a set of core values. Some of them are inherited. Some of them are things we grew up with, and they will be things that if we were to interrogate this, if we were to investigate, do some core value exercises, we would see them and go, wow, yeah, I'm proud of that one. That one fits, that one suits my personality and the things that I want out of my life, and so I'm going to keep that one. And sometimes we encounter values that were handed to us by our parents or by our culture or by our teachers at school that actually doesn't have any place in our adult world. We don't believe in it anymore. It isn't right for us. It's a legacy of where we came from. So the function of anger, the theory goes, is that we have this core set of values. We have this core set of things that we absolutely treasure, which we think are most important in the world, our relationships or our wealth and security or whatever it is. Our core values form this central hub around which the rest of our identity is built. Now, many of us, of course, don't know what our core values are unless you've really stopped and thought about it and wondered. And there are lots of exercises. I have an exercise that I regularly give my coaching clients, and I ask them to investigate what their core values are. Might be worth looking online to try and work out what yours are if you don't know what they are. But they end up establishing what these boundaries are. So when they're transgressed, when we are not properly honouring our values, or when someone we're in a relationship with, or when a situation doesn't properly honour the values that we carry, the most important things in our lives, then we will feel anger. Our anger exists in order to protect and restore that which is most vulnerable to us. So it's the same stuff. It's still basically about boundaries, but it's a more nuanced way of understanding it. It's also important to say that not all of your values are necessarily going to be about doing great and noble things in the world. It's important for you to also be okay and be safe and be, to have the things that you most fundamentally need in your life. So on the deepest level, when you're trying to understand your own anger, whether you have too much of it, whether you don't feel it at all, whether you just don't understand how your anger relates to the things that are going on around you, the most important thing for you to begin with is understanding your core values, understanding what is most important to you in your life. Because the theory goes that you feel anger when those are transgressed. So the question becomes, what is not receiving enough attention? What is not being honoured? What is not being protected in your life that's really, really important to you? And there are a few different possibilities here. One is that you're aware of some stuff that's really important to you, that's core to your needs and your values, but just the situation in your life doesn't allow you to honour it properly. It has to be suppressed or avoided because you're putting something else first. So that can be one thing. If you know that there's something that you need, something that you value, some boundary that you have in your life, but something else in your life trumps it and means that you don't get to properly protect that, well, there's some questions there, like, does that have to be like that? Does it always have to be like that? Is that something that you can incrementally change over time? So that's a situation. It may be that you're aware of something, but you're not currently promoting it and protecting it as fiercely as perhaps you could. Another option is that you're not really aware of what you value most, or you're not really aware of how you should be protecting it or honouring it or promoting it. And that's true for so many of us, and that becomes just a really interesting bit of personal inquiry. Take it to your journal. Try and reflect on this and think about, well, what is my relationship with anger and what is my relationship with the things that I most value in my life? And then try and draw some links between the two. And then finally, of course, as I was saying earlier, some of your core values aren't your adult values. They are something you inherited as a child and they just stayed with you. They just flare up from time to time and you find yourself fighting to protect things that actually, if you were to give this enough attention, perhaps you'd find that this doesn't apply for you anymore, or it doesn't feel relevant for you, or it's time to just leave that behind and move on to something that feels more authentic, more you, more adult. So occasionally we may find ourselves getting furious because something that we were taught is really important as a child is not being honoured, not being preserved, not being protected. And yet, if we were to really look at that and decide, does this feel like me? Like, should I be protecting this? Actually, no. This was what my father wanted me to be. This is what my mother used to talk about being so important all the time. But actually, that was her stuff, or that was his value system. That's not me. So sometimes this exposes and brings to light a whole piece of personal growth work that you may need to go through to update your responses from childhood ones to adult. So that's the theory stuff. How you put that into practice in your relationships and in the decisions you make that form the shape of your life is mostly down to how much do you understand your values and what you stand for and what's most important to you, and how much are you willing to fight for them. Many of us struggle to express anger in any given moment. It can feel hot and difficult, it can feel out of control, or it can feel shameful and something I shouldn't really be expressing if that's the culture you were brought up in, if that's the value system that your family passed on to you. So a lot of us struggle to find the words, the appropriate tone of voice, the actions that will express the anger that will get back the boundaries that we've lost and which will protect and honor our core value system. So in those situations, I just encourage you to see this as a process and not expect yourself to be able to jump to the end straight away. You may want to fumble around with different words with your partner. You may need to tell someone in your life that you do struggle with this stuff. And with their support, experiment with words and with actions and with shouting or with trying to be calm or whatever it is, finding a way to be able to effectively express your anger that does push back against these boundaries and that does honor the things that you value in your life. As I will say a lot, take this to your journal. Write about your anger. Talk about the things you wish you could say, or the things that you realize that you don't make enough time for, or that you don't properly honor and respect, and make some decisions about how you're going to change your behavior or your situation in your life or your relationships or whatever it is. How are you going to update things so that your life is properly honored, so that your core values are properly enshrined in your life, and so that you are getting your needs met? Allow this to be something you're working on over time. So, as I say, don't expect yourself to be an expert at this overnight, but just be determined, be focused that incrementally over time you will get better at expressing your anger, at befriending it and harnessing it and using it, at recognizing that when it surges up, that's what it's trying to tell me. Okay, so that value I've noticed I always just tend to put aside, or I tend to suppress because it's easier to do that in my life, or because my relationships will survive that better, or because everyone else around me will cope more easily with that. Over time, just allow yourself to learn, to grow, to experiment with different ways of handling this. Do you normally just rage out? Do you normally just suppress and go quiet? Do you normally try and change the topic? Do you normally try to be passive aggressive and manipulative? Whatever it is that you normally do, try to step outside your comfort zone and try something new. And if it doesn't work, or if it seems to work but it was scary and you want to go back, just allow this to be a journey. Write this all out in your journal. Allow this to be something that's unfolding and growing over time. Ultimately, anger is your friend and it's on your side. It is trying to support you in building healthier relationships, in making sure that you are healthy and safe in your life, in order to make sure that you are focused on and promoting your core values. Whatever problems you've encountered with anger are a call to action. They are saying something has gone wrong here. Either you have some personal growth work to do to escape from early life values that no longer matter to you, or you need to more deeply understand what it is that you believe and treasure and hold most dear, or you need to learn new ways to fight to make sure that you are heard, that your boundaries are maintained, and that you get what you need out of your life. And when you can see it like that, anger is a helpful and profoundly positive thing. It's just really disruptive. Its goal is to disrupt the status quo to get you back in touch with what matters most to you. So yes, it is problematic. It is difficult. It can create conflict and difficulty in relationships. But ultimately, anger is trying to move us towards a healthier place in our life. If we can listen to it, and if we can do the personal growth and the understanding that it requires of us, and then begin putting it into action, then we become a better person and we build better relationships. That's the theory, and the growth and the scary bit and the going outside a comfort zone is the experimenting with different ways of communicating and different ways of expressing ourselves. Okay, so I promised you some practical stuff. Ways of being able to express your anger in healthy ways. Now, this is not the relational bit. The whole bunch of stuff that I was just talking about, that's your personal growth. That's your personal development. That is, how do you use the information that anger is bringing you in order to grow as a person, improve your relationships. That's the subtle, difficult stuff that you work with over long periods of time. But there are plenty of times in our lives when we are just angry and it's causing a problem. It's clouding our thinking, or it's polluting our other feelings, or it's stopping us getting to like a clear decision in our lives, and we're just furious, we're just really angry, and we need to express that. So here are 3 ideas about what to do when you feel like that. So the first one is shouting and screaming, and I'm not kidding. This is taking yourself to a remote place or somewhere that's far enough away from people that no one can hear you, and it is shouting and screaming and trying to vocalize everything that you feel. Anger tends to sit in the tummy, or sometimes it leaks up to the chest a little bit, but we're trying to then bring it up and express it out through the mouth, and shouting at the top of your voice is a great way to do that. If you want to, you can make that into words, and so you say all the things that you don't think it's okay to say, and just really get the venom out. Like, say awful things that you would never say to someone's face, and just shout it out into the world. Sometimes, though, just making incoherent noises is fine as well, but try and make it rageful. It's very easy for this to become something else, but try and roar from the belly and try and just shout your anger out. Sometimes this is a great way of just lowering that simmering state of anger so that you can do more of this personal growth stuff, and so you can get back to operating normally. So that's one healthy way to deal with anger. It can do other interesting things in your personal growth. If you're able to shout and roar and vocalize, then that can do some interesting stuff around self-esteem, self-image, and various other things. So I generally encourage it as a thing to do. I just take myself up onto the downs next to Brighton quite often, and just shout when I make sure there's no one else around. Okay, second idea. This is a bit of a personal one, but when my client said to me, what are some healthy ways to express anger, I kind of thought about, well, what do I do? So I'll just tell you what I do. When I am furious, when I am just hugely angry and it's reached a point where it isn't something I can work with, isn't something I can safely express, I just feel very angry. What I do is I take myself into a space in my life where I'm not going to cause any harm to people. Sometimes that's going for a walk, sometimes it's going to the gym, so it's often part of a physical thing, but sometimes it could just be doing the washing up or hoovering or something like that. And what I try and do with my anger is I try and burn it. I try and focus it more and more, and I try and channel it more and more, and I put some angry music on, and I try and push it up from being whatever it's simmering at, like a 5 or a 6, I try and push it up to 11. So I am just furious. And if I'm walking along, it becomes very embodied, and I can feel like I'm walking like a fighter, and I've got this furious expression on my face. Sometimes I do this walking through town, and I think people do kind of get out of my way. But whatever it is that I'm doing, I will just get myself very, very angry, because I find that I don't have the energy to maintain that state forever. I can't just stay angry forever. So rather than keeping it at a kind of normal, manageable level and just letting it sit there for quite a long time, I push it up to 11, I try and burn it all at once, and I find that within 15 or 20 minutes, the anger begins to abate because I just don't have the energy to maintain that state forever. So that's a thing that I do to process the feeling more quickly and get me to a calmer state where I can actually start going, okay, well, what am I going to do about this? And the third thing is to channel it into physical activity. So I lift weights at the gym, and sometimes I will take my anger to the gym and I will allow it to, as long as I'm not doing anything which is too technical or I'm going to injure myself, I will just allow it to power my emotions. But it's possible to channel this into walking or running or swimming or things like yoga, whatever it is, wherever there's a physical expression. And really what you're working on here as well is your mind-body connection, because the idea is to feel your anger entering your body, being diffused around your body, being used by your muscles to actually feel your anger in action. So this isn't about unconsciously simply being angry while you're doing a thing, because that can be dangerous. That can be, you can be doing one thing and then suddenly it can spiral out of control and become something else. This is conscious. This is taking your anger and allowing it to suffuse into your body, feeling the motions of your body, developing that relationship with your body, and burning your anger that way, expressing your anger that way. Sometimes it's useful to imagine it as a color that's leaving you. Maybe it's a burning red color that is being sort of radiated from your body as you're doing exercise. And sometimes it's useful to use that energy, to challenge yourself to go further or faster or do more than you can normally do, and use the energy that comes with anger to do that. And that will eventually allow your anger to dissipate. And again, you can get back to this more calm state where you can decide what you're going to do with your anger. So that's it. That's today's video. I hope you found that one useful. As I say, this does explain why we don't like anger. Anger is hugely disruptive because it calls all individual people back to their core values. It causes them to get back in touch with what's most important to them. And when you want a calm relationship with all people in your life, perhaps that's what you needed when you were growing up, or perhaps more likely that's what your parents needed while you were growing up. It leads to this idea that anger is a negative thing. You shouldn't get angry because it upsets the situation and it's difficult for everyone to deal with. And yeah, it absolutely is. It's disruptive and it rocks the boat, and it can upset everything and it can throw everything up into the air. But the idea is that that would only need to happen if something really important wasn't being maintained or promoted or honoured or being cared for. So anger is calling us back to our best selves, as all of our feelings are. And that is its mechanism that it uses. It says something is wrong here, and it's up to you to work out what that is. I hope that's been useful to you. I hope you can get some practical, useful stuff out of that. Now remember, this all came about because my client said to me, how do you work with anger in a healthy way? Well, I've talked about how you can understand anger and about how you can use it progressively over time to work on your personal growth and improve the relationships in your life. But I've been able to come up with a few specific examples about how you healthily express anger. It would be really useful to hear from you. What do you think? How do you think anger is healthily expressed? How do you do it, or how do you aspire to do it, or how have you seen people you admire do it? What is a healthy expression of anger? What does it look like? And maybe how does that contrast with some really unhealthy expressions of anger? What would you really hate, or what are you trying to get away from in your life? Do you express anger in ways that you feel are hurtful or shameful or bad? And what are you doing with that? I would love to maybe do a follow-up to this at some point, using all your feedback and your ideas and exploring more ideas about how you express anger in a healthy way. As I say, I hope this one has been helpful to you. Please remember to give it a like, leave a comment, letting me know what you think, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.